Once the drums are finished, I like to spend some time with percussion. Much like vocal harmonies, the addition of percussion can really enhance the production value of a song. And on top of that, the subtle rhythmic accents and variations you can introduce can very much affect the overall feel of the groove. In this track, I used a shaker, a tambourine, some hand claps, and finger snaps. Now, there are plenty of good percussion sample sets out there, but for this track I wanted to play the shaker and tambourine live in order to really bring out the swagger and looseness in the groove. Small percussion like this is very inexpensive, and if you want to have some fun getting creative, you can make your own small percussion pieces for little to no money at all. Using old soup cans filled with different types of raw beans, rice, etc., you'll find that you can get many different types of tones and have some fun making them in the meantime. For the claps and snaps, I used the Clap Pack Deluxe from Loops de la Creme, a really cool boutique sample set developer from Austria. They already have a great loose, natural feel to them, but when I play them, I make sure to hit multiple claps and snaps at subtly different times and velocities, since a room full of people clapping and snapping will inevitably all have their own rhythmic tendencies. Now that the rhythmic foundation is set, I moved on to the guitars. Some people may prefer to do bass guitar recording after drums, but I like to have the chordal structure recorded first so I can play with the melodic passages on the bass and have a concrete harmonic reference point. I'm a fan of melodic bass lines, and having something to play to makes experimenting with the melodies a whole lot easier. And since I wrote this song on the mandolin and guitar, and I knew what they were going to do, that was the next logical step. For recording the mandolin, I used a Microtech Gefell M300 small diaphragm condenser microphone and a Flea 47 large diaphragm tube condenser microphone. Typically, small diaphragm condensers are great for acoustic and stringed instruments, since they react to the transients very quickly due to the smaller physical size of the diaphragm. But since the mandolin is a narrower bandwidth instrument, I used a large diaphragm tube mic as well in order to try and get a thicker, more weighted sound option to blend in with the Gefell. I ran both of these through an Electronaut M63 2-channel tube preamplifier, which is one of my favorite mic preamps due to its extraordinary component quality and tonal options. The electric guitars were up next. For these, I used two Kemper profiling amplifiers. Since its release about 2 years ago, the Kemper has become a mainstay of touring artists and recording professionals all across the world. And for good reason, as it brings a whole new concept to digital guitar recording. In short, it allows me to mic up any amp that I have, using any microphone and preamp combination I want, and capture that exact sound in the profiling amp. I then have access to all of the typical amplifier controls such as gain, EQ, and effects, but within the lunchbox size amp. There are a whole lot of great benefits to recording this way, and to see an in-depth video about the profiling amp and its designer, you can go to the link below and see the top shelf video I did on that piece as well. I'm a big fan of stereo guitars, so I set up two different amps and recorded one guitar into them simultaneously. Depending on the amplifiers used and the gain settings on those amps, the two different amps can respond very differently to dynamics, so you can find some unique tones by just altering your playing style and listening to the result. For the main guitar part, I used a JCM 800 and an Engel Fireball simultaneously, which gave me lots of note clarity on the cleaner side with the JCM, and a consistent higher frequency crunch on top with the higher gain of the Engel. For the heavy ending, I layered 4 mono amps on top with higher gain settings and brighter overall tones. Being able to switch one amp while listening to how it blends with the second amp is a really fun and convenient way to arrive at guitar sounds that, while on their own might not sound great to you, end up sounding awesome when used in conjunction with a second and differently dialed in amp tone. Once those are recorded, the bass is up next. I've been using plug-in bass amp simulators for years, and IK Multimedia's Ampeg SVX gets used the most here. The guys at IK did a great job designing this plugin, and it has a whole bunch of great bass amps available, as well as different cabinets and effects. I like to use my TubeTech MEC1A channel strip for bass, and I've found that compressing the DI bass signal a dB or so before hitting the bass amp simulator goes a long way to fattening up the sound and taking some of the digital harshness out of the amp sim. Of course, you can do this with any outboard compressor, and I highly recommend giving this a try, especially if you've found amp sims to have a bit too much fizz on the top end. Also, when using a tube preamp on the way in with a decent amount of input gain, can nicely enrich the harmonics in the signal, which I generally find more pleasing. When that's not what I'm looking for, I find the Creation Audiolab's MW1 to be an excellent guitar and bass DI, because in addition to being a pristine input stage, it has the capacity to be a high-powered clean boost, also with input attenuation control for enriching or dialing back extra harmonic content. Furthermore, with the MW1, you can use any of your outboard rack gear in your guitar recording signal chain, which of course opens up a whole new world of possible compression, equalization, and effects combinations. If you look towards the end of the song, you can see that I have a separate bass fuzz track. This is something I do pretty often. I simply take a copy of the bass file, duplicate it to another track, and run it through a distorted guitar amp. In this case, I'm using Native Instruments Guitar Rig 5, a plugin I use quite often for this since it has so many amp options. This allows me to blend in as much or as little distortion as I want, without sacrificing any of the low end of the original bass signal. Since distortion can really eat up the low end, it's best to process your distorted bass separately in order to keep a full frequency bass signal at all times during the song. And as with the stereo guitar amping I described earlier, working this way will allow you to audition in real time both the distorted and the clean bass, enabling you to find just the right amp to complement the other. So that's an overview of the way I recorded these guitars and what tools I commonly use to get the sounds I'm looking for. Coming up, we'll be taking a look at the orchestral and keyboard programming, as well as the vocal recording process. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.